All right. Nice. So many wonderful audience members here. Hello, hello. And so many returning members. It's great to see you all. Okay. Shall we get started?
Okay.
All right. Well, welcome everyone to the DHAsia webinar. It is a series designed for DH researchers in Asia, DH scholars of Asia, and those who are keen on all things DHAsia. My name is Setsuko Yokoyama, Assistant Professor of Digital Humanities at Singapore University of Technology and Design. I'm today's host, but this webinar is organized by a group of DH scholars across the region. So let me share their names in the chat for your reference. And if you are ever keen on joining the organizing team, please reach out to any one of us. Now, without further ado, let me introduce today's moderator, Dr. Christopher Khoo, who is an associate professor at Wee Kim Wee School of Communication and Information at Nanyang Technological University in Singapore. He is a library and information science expert specializing in knowledge organization, ontologies, national languages processing, among other domains. Today, he has kindly agreed to moderate our conversations, and in his capacity as a lead developer of the knowledge graph system used for the Polyglot Asian Medicine project. Please, could you introduce today's speaker for us?
Thank you very much, Professor Setsuko. Greetings from Singapore and welcome to Digital Humanities Asia webinar series. And today we have a special treat. We have Michael Stanley-Baker from Nanyang Technological University History Department. He's going to present a part of his work, and it's titled Ancient and Modern Biotopes: What Can Be Learned from Digitizing Ancient Pharmacology. So I'm very pleased to introduce him because I know him as a very exciting researcher, and we are collaborating, and has kindly involved me in his exciting project. He has a very rich, research history. I would say he is a founder of the Digital Humanities cluster in Singapore. At least he is a prime mover and motivator for our Digital Humanities cluster. Dr. Stanley-Baker is a scholar of Chinese medicine and medieval Taoism at Nanyang Technological University. So I'm reading his very short bio data that he has provided, but it's very modest. He's a very modest person. He actually has he is a multidisciplinary researcher integrating so many areas, including various types of technology into humanities. He has written a few books, including the Routledge Handbook of Chinese Medicine and a few other books. And he is the leader of the Polyglot Asian Medicines project, as well as the president of the International Association for the Study of Traditional Asian Medicine. So without further ado, I don't want to take up much more of his speaking time. So I invite Michael to present his talk.
Hi, everyone. Thanks so much, Setsuko, for this great opportunity and for all of the organizational work you've been doing for DHAsia. I think it's such a important collectivity. I know there are a number of people named in this list, who've been so also, including yourself, also very active movers and shakers in DH in Singapore over the last few years. And so it's really an honor to be part of the presentation this year. And I really want to thank Chris for donating his extremely valuable time. And it's extremely valuable to me because he's been this phenomenal, it was a miracle of meeting of minds in terms of his vision and experience in terms of thinking across different knowledge systems. And I remember when we first met, Chris said, you know, I compare knowledge systems and how to link them up. And I have been doing this, you know, comparatively in my own work, thinking across Taoism and medicine, and, you know, also the contemporary context of Chinese medicine, which is one of the things we think about a lot in ISTM, this Society for Traditional Asian Medicine. So to then meet somebody who has amazing technical expertise for bringing these worlds together was it's just been a godsend. So working with Chris has been amazing. I just want to give you your celebrate you and thank you for your contributions. So I'm gonna share my PowerPoint, so hopefully you can see this now. And okay, and we should have, oops, okay. Now let me change my pointer option. Okay. So what I'm going to talk about is I'm going to sort of introduce a few different dimensions of the project, but by way of kind of trying to think through what are some of the advantages for that the digital humanities affords us in kind of humanistic research, and I think beyond just the humanities. And I think this is what's really exciting about DH. So what I'm going to think about here, oops, okay, when I click, it doesn't go. So at the foundation, I want to just offer some thought points up about we use this word ontology, and it's used by different kinds of disciplines in different ways. You know, in philosophy, ontology is a branch of metaphysics dealing with the nature of being, like what is it? You know, what am I? These kind of fundamental questions. And of course, in data science, it's something quite different. It's a set of concepts and categories in a subject area that shows their properties and the relations between them. And this is something that Chris teaches me a lot about, you know, through explaining to very simple me, you know, Neo4j, and he has to dumb his extreme expertise down so that I can understand that. But the way I relate to this is through the science and technology studies understanding of ontology, which is really that knowledge is not entirely epistemological. How we know is not just embedded in kind of, you know, the semantic domain of assumptions and analytical methods, but it's expressed in material forms and in social relations and in the kind of worlds through which we move. And science and technology studies really articulates that kind of ontology very well. And it's that I'm thinking through how to bring how DH can help us move across these different lived worlds and my research. So so here's the ontology behind one of the features of the Polyglot site, which Chris knows very intimately, which is the Polyglot Medicine Knowledge Graph. And this is when one of the questions Chris first asked me was, you know, well, what's your ontology? And I looked at him and I was like, it's organic. Because I've just been scraping dictionaries and scraping early pharmacological texts and kind of trying to model how those systems know, right? And how they create hierarchies of ordering of terms and things. And at the time when I first started, I thought, oh, well, I'm redescribing what's happening in this textual form in a digital form by creating metadata. And then my metadata is an analysis of the ontology of relations inside this early pharmacology. So it's a nice, you know, humanistic analytical tool. But one of the things that I've come to realize, and I hope that we'll see through this talk, is actually the ontology. Once you translate from text into digital, you suddenly interconnect in a whole different realm of relationalities that are entirely different from the ones in the text. So it is not a digital twin of the text. It's actually something with a very different kind of life and expression. So one of the things that got me into this thinking was moving to Singapore as a scholar of Chinese medicine and of early Taoism, and learning that there's this whole, you know, there's a whole community of practitioners who speak in Hokkien predominantly, but in other Chinese dialects too, about plant medicine here, and I began to realize that actually most of what they're dealing with is not in the TCM corpus. So how can we come to better understand that and compare its history? And that's kind of one of the foundational motivations for the Polyglot Medicine Project. To understand the knowledge and background of this man here, this incredibly wise person who runs the garden at NTU, Uncle Bay. And we see, and I've called this Peranakan medicine. Peranakan is a term for people who come to the Malay Peninsula, intermarry, and then develop these kind of Creole or hybrid cultures, right? So you have Peranakan Chinese, you have Peranakan Indians, many different kinds of Peranakans. But what I identify as this Hokkien and Malay medical mix is something that's of interest to me, and I'm calling it Peranakan medicine. And this is an example of this that I picked up from the Penang Medical College, Chinese Medical College, an exhibit they had in 1988, where they used Chinese terms and language to think through local plant medicine. And I love this text because it's Jueban. It's a historian's treasure. It's out of print and hard to access. You have to have a personal connection to get it, and it's a lovely thing. But it's ontologically disconnected, right, from the rest of the medical world. In the garden, people like Uncle Bay. I hope my pointer feature is not going to prevent me from playing videos. Looks like it might. Hang on. I might have to. Come on, pointer. All right, there we go. Hey, okay. So can you hear Uncle Bay? 碎叶马兰 Okay.
这个小博古，
小博古，
这个侧柏，
侧柏，
这个翼龙边，
翼龙边，啊哈，
这个满天星，
满天星，
这个白花野牡丹。
啊，好漂亮。So Uncle Bay was providing us this year. We couldn't go to the garden because it was under renovation. So he gave us 24 different plants, and then we took these plants into the classroom, and we used the Polyglot website to kind of explore them. Given the names that he'd told them, I gave the students, okay, they picked a plant, and I said, identify it in the video, to capture the name, and then go look for it in Polyglot, and let's see if we can find them. So it was an interesting exercise. I can talk about that more in the Q&A. But oops, let's move on. So here are the students sort of doing that exercise, kind of exploring the plants. And so they really can get a sense for the lived life of these kind of medicines, which is kind of fun. So the Polyglot site has three main components, right? We have a big text archive. I'll talk briefly about that, but not much today. We have the ethnobotanical synonymy, which Chris has done an incredible amount of work on. We'll conclude the talk with that, and I'll introduce a little bit about mapping historical texts as well, and how DH has helped me be able to rethink these early pharmacological traditions. And we link out through the website to modern biodiversity websites that show where the plants grow today, biodiversity heritage things, which talk about the early modern science first edition manuscripts. You can get all these images. And out to molecular content and of the herbs and metabolic activity databases. So we want to connect out to these other domains. I won't spend too much time going over this video because it's online, and we a lot to cover. So, but this is a video you can find on the site, and it shows kind of some of the dimensions. I want to give credit to my students in a class that I did with Faiza Zakaria, another partner on the project. And we wrote a class together on Malay and Chinese medicine, and students went off and did these great videos. But so the site has, we have digital maps of the early tradition. We have segmented texts, which have been densely tagged. We can port out those tags. It's open access. Into software like Palladio, so you can do your own graphic exploration with the tags. We've put GIS tag names in some of the texts. using historical GIS that you can, visualize against historical maps from different time periods. So because this Bensao text has multiple historical layers in it, you may want to compare against different political regions, political periods. So we have Malay texts. The Malay texts link out to, as well as Chinese, the Malay texts link out directly to the synonymy. And the synonymy links between Malay terms to scientific terms, and also to the Malay ones also have some disease terms. We don't have that in the Chinese because it's too complicated, so we link out another way. We've verified all the names with Kew Gardens, so we have about 8,000 modern species, but about 68,000 historical out-of-date species names in our data. This is the biodiversity heritage. You see these first edition texts in which those botanical species are named. We link out to these biodiversity maps like this one, which shows you not just where the plants originate, but also where they have migrated to, which is useful for the history of medicine and its transmission. And through the botany, we can then explore across the languages. So here we can use, we're exploring Piper nigrum, and having identified this species in Malay and the botany, we can then link out to the Chinese name tradition, Hujiao. And then when you open that up, you see a whole host of complex naming history, which I'll talk a little bit more in detail. And we link out to TCM databases, which talk more detail about the function, both in Chinese and in English. And then, as I mentioned, to these kind of molecular content data. Okay, so a little bit about the kind of the segmented texts. Oops, I think I have to press play. So with segmented data, getting everything down to the paragraph and to the sentence level enables us to have much higher, the term collocation results are much more reliable because we know that they're connected semantically, not just by virtue of being on the same page. They're densely tagged for all kinds of different detail. And as I mentioned, we've got these maps. You can look at the maps as the entirety of the text as well as individual paragraphs. Let's see what this shows. Right, so here's the entirety of the drugs, and here's the historical maps. But here are for an individual paragraph, here are all of the dots that appear in the individual paragraph, and they also link out to other data. Okay, so that's a brief kind of overview of that. So it's kind of a schematic of some of the data, the large scale of what's on the site. But I want to think about in the remaining few minutes I've got about the kind of different ways in which it's helped me think and rethink early pharmacology and connections to modern lived practice. So the kind of the state of the art on kind of the emergence of the pharmacological tradition in China is written by Yamada Keiji. This 2003 actually translates an earlier text of his in Japanese into Chinese. And he argued that it took place in the Central Plains here between Taishan and Songshan. Maybe I can do my pointer here. There we go. So between Songshan and Taishan, and between Handan and the Yellow River. But once we use GIS mapping, we get a very different picture. What I did with this text is we mapped 3 different layers: the earliest 2nd century text, something from the 3rd, 4th century, and then from the 5th century. And so the 3rd century and the 5th century one are in red and blue. And when we compare them, so here you can see the names of the different layers. When you look at the GIS points, it shows something quite novel, quite different from what Yamada Keiji surmised. With his paper-bound analysis, using GIS, we see that actually almost all of the points on this in this early text all appear on this one common geographical feature, which is waterways. Which says something quite different about the history of the emergence of the tradition than we're used to. So how does that help us rethink kind of the emergence of this technology. One of the things that oops, I have to do this. I'm not used to these pointer funniness. All right. Okay. So one of the things that I identified is that the highest concentration are along what I call the Yellow River Corridor. So there's a strong network of communication, which appears to be prehistorical in the sense that it's before we have records of the Bansao tradition itself, because our earliest records are really of these regions are from the 3rd century. And this is a much older network, obviously. And so I think we need to rethink the kind of technical relation and socio-technical relations. What Yamada Keiji was thinking from the perspective of historical texts, which give us a certain circumscribed view because of the interests of these early authors, right? Was this focus on sacred mountains where these religious figures, right, Xianren or transcendence, sought longevity and recorded all their observations. And so the influence of these Taoist practitioners on the tradition looms large in our understanding of the tradition. But I think we can now see an absence, actually, that is of other kinds of actors, which this geographic distribution tells us some clues about. I imagine that this kind of distribution is something like the formation of the Silk Road, which emerged by goat herders migrating across. And there's a great paper in Nature that proved that goats were doing all these migration. The major trading spots were at the best grazing spots. And so there's these microecologies and micro trading networks that produced a communication system. So I think we can see something similar, a stepwise trading between local regions, but in this case along riverways within these microeconomies and local relations of exchange. Now, key, and this point links our historical analysis to our digital analysis, is that drug names were this important currency which regularized the exchange, how these objects migrated through these communities. So these points at which on our maps, I think are not, because I produced this map actually in 2017. I could look at it and think about it. And somebody said, well, can you tell me, the director of the Max Planck Institute was like, okay, you've got nice dots on the page, but what are they? Well, why did they distribute like that? And it took me another, half a decade to think through this, to kind of figure, okay, this is my at least current thinking. That actually they don't represent biotopes where the organic object grow. They're sites of socio-technical exchange where objects were translated from the wild into human domains across these multi-epistemic networks of different technical actors until they circulated in networks that were accessible to the people who recorded them, right? These Materia Medica compilers. But here, the key markers are drug names are one of our important fixed historical data that's reliable. And we have them recorded in time because we know when the editions were produced. And now we can locate them very fixedly in place using historical GIS. But what we have to remain agnostic about is the botanical identity, because we don't really know what they were picking. We don't really know if they were, because what we do know is there's a lot of substitution practices. You're supposed to have this kind of dangui, and then the local guy goes, well, we don't have that dangui, so we'll use a different, local herb instead. So we have to remain, suspend our belief, right, about that. So it's great to have clarity about what's fixed and reliable and what's up for debate, right? So a little more about some of the tools of analysis that we've got on the Polyglot site. So we have about 390 texts of medical texts from across the imperial tradition, even into the Mingguo period, the nationalist period. 27 million characters. I worked out a few months ago, that's about 9% of the Siku Qianshu, the Qing Dynasty imperial collection. So it's a huge thing. It's donated to us by Liu Changhua of the China Academy of Medical Sciences, or the Zhongguo Zhongyi Keshuyuan. So we spent a couple of years, a lot of work with colleagues in National Taiwan University, extracting their format into the DocuSky format that we have available now. So it's very highly segmented. These texts, you can see we have segmented by let's do pointer options here. We have into chapters, and then we have each chapter is segmented into different sections, and each section has little paragraphs. So we have these hierarchical layers of semantic segmenting, which we can use for analysis. Let's see what happens if I options. Okay. So we can let me see. Oh, this, yeah, right. So we can take these kind of segmented texts, and we can do, and I won't describe that here today, but we can do kind of collocation analysis of disease terms or other things and figure out relationships between drugs and diseases. And this is a future form of research that PhD student Joachim Prockwiese is working with me on. And he's been doing this work already at Charité University in Berlin for the last 5 years. So this demo that you see processing here is we're processing one particular historical recipe from the Han Dynasty, guizhitang, or cinnamon twig decoction, breaking it down and then extracting the herbs that are in this formula as it has been named in these texts over time, and then all the variant herbs that are combined with it. And what we end up doing, and this is just kind of an overview, is porting them over into Palladio, and we then do graphical visualization and start to identify historical patterns. In this case, what you see, the paler dots are the text titles, and then the darker dots are the drug terms, and then you can begin to see clusters of association between the different texts. And then using a timeline feature, using a timeline feature, we can then also begin to identify historical change over time. And then we see different things emerging. Through this experiment, I was able to discover, oh, it's in the 3rd and 4th century that, 13th, 14th century that this formula begins used for external injury solutions. And then in the 16th century, people start using the DHAsia, or adding and subtracting method of pharmacological editing, recipe editing, as it were, in the tradition to vary the formula even further. So there's different kinds of analysis we can do with this format. Okay, so that's that major text stuff, and we'll put that aside. I want to talk about the polyglot synonymy. So we have, as I mentioned earlier, we've got about 8,000 species and about 70,000 synonyms, botanical synonyms. We've got 42,000 Chinese names. These are 注名 or primary names, and they're 别名 or their alternate names. We have 3,600 Malay names. We've scraped from actually over 24 dictionaries. And one of the interesting things we included is the provenance, or what in the Chinese tradition is called the 出处. That's the text title where the term first emerges in the tradition. So we scraped this from dictionaries, and we augmented that with authors and dates. And that enables us to do something kind of new. Here's the map again, we can share a little more detail about how it's structured. You can see the Chinese data is much more complex because it's an older documented tradition, with a lot of different kinds of material and different names and all this other thing. So the Chinese one is complex. As we were scraping the Malay stuff, we came across a different language from Bawah Sarawak, from Borneo, this region of Borneo. We took in some ethnographic names from a linguistic survey done in the Alores Island near East Timor, this tribe called the Abui. And then we also have the linking out to botanical data and the bioinformatics that I showed earlier. As I mentioned, they've been verified by Khoo. We're now an authorized source for Kew Gardens, who are the world's leading authority on medicinal plant names. And they people talk about your Google Scholar citations, right? And I just submitted my tenure file. So I submitted this as an addition because it's not ranked on Google, but we have over 50,000 citations from Kew alone. It's great. So those of you in DH, capture your citations. You can use this in your cases against the administration when you're fighting those battles. Now, this is I know I'm kind of going past time. Let me just show some of the fun things we can do though. So here I'm searching for Aquilaria, the species. We can search by the botanical name, and then it pops up options within the available ethnonyms. And then once you pop out this graph, you can then further explore it. So you can see here we have data on the primary name in Chinese, in Pinyin, in simplified and traditional. We have fixed index numbers. We have the variety of botanical names that are there, because you can have multiple botanicals associated with a single ethnonym. So we keep this ambiguity. We're not trying to be normative and identify only one for use, but be descriptive and show the variety that's at play. Here's our link out to the Khoo database, which then shows you many other languages. We have Indian and other things over there. We've actually got more data that we've just are just in the process of ingesting. We have 78,000 South Asian drug names, but that's for future presentation. So let's see, right, and I've showed you the maps already. So we can also learn the provenance. So here you can see that the text title where this Chenxiang, this name first emerges, and we've augmented it with, dynastic data and things like that. So you can get a better sense for this temporality. Like I said earlier, names in place and time, key pieces of information. Parts of plant are here. And then that's the provenance data. So we can organize this provenance data, that is the Chu in new ways and make new discoveries. So I did this study on cloves, and I found out that by indexing by the botanical species, I could pop out all these Chinese names I didn't know there were for cloves, for the species. And it turns out, using drug names across time, we can see the emergence of new material practices. The fruit comes out in the 5th century. The seed becomes used in the 6th, the bark in the 8th, the roots become used in the 11th, twigs in the 16th, and essential oils in the 18th. If you're a historian of Chinese medicine, you'll recognize some of these time periods as major new periods of exchange, interregional exchange, right? Obviously, the 18th century, you're getting Western medicine coming in, but the 8th is the Tang, and there's a lot of land-based migration across the Gansu corridor. But in the 11th century, a lot of sea travel coming up through Southeast Asia. So, you can begin to totally re-examine these plants and their materiality in an entirely new way through this. And I'm very excited about, and I didn't know we'd be able to do this when we didn't plan to make this happen. And this is the genius of what Chris produced, right? By insisting on we use Neo4j and knowledge graphing and not data tables. He said, this is not a database, this is a knowledge graph. And it's very clear. And I'm still trying to understand it, but what I do understand is its utility as a humanist is just so magical, so powerful. Okay, just to show you simply, oops, I have to keep changing my pointer to navigate the videos. How you do it, you basically pop out your alternate terms. Everything that's highlighted in blue has provenance data. And then so once you expand all the provenance data, you can then, can I just zoom along here quickly? There we go. So you can just, it takes a while, but it takes about, not long, like 10 minutes or so. And using this kind of bubble chart thing, you can produce a little graph by putting together all of the provenances in one place and organize it for yourself visually. And then begin to analyze, okay, once you can pop out of the full screen into the windowed visualization, and then pick up your historical data here. So you can use this to do a very quick overview of this material culture, completely impossible before this. It's so exciting. Okay, so looking forward, how I think this can help, and I did some trial experiments. One of the things that this author argued, and I wrote a book review for her in Asian Medicine, which just came out, the review. She argued that modern pharmacology is broken because it is so trapped within high finance and high legal boundaries that actually very little innovation is happening within big pharma. And so she did an examination about innovation and contribution to the global knowledge commons for medicine, and arguing that, and looking at India, Japan, and China, and how they manage their traditional medicine IP, and against axes of openness and innovation, right? So she has this chart. And through her study and comparison of these different systems, she identified one of the key sites for the maximum openness and innovation for developing new things that contribute to the global knowledge commons of medicine is sacred gardens. Now, she identified sacred gardens in India, but when I read this, I was like, oh my gosh, NTU and the gardens in Singapore are absolutely doing this, right? Here is some of the bioinformatics information that's coming out of TCM analysis. This website just revamped their website. This is the 2.0, and you can see down here on the bottom right, they have 2 million predicted target proteins in the human body, and all these, right, huge amounts of computational data that are going on. But I'm also curious about other communities of practice. The gardens is also the source for producing a natural products line that is now is now on the market. And so one of the things that I did was analyze the herbs that are in their formulas, and I wanted to give my dad a birthday present in May, and I wanted to bring him some live plants. I've already brought him some plants from the garden 5 years ago when I first moved here for his diabetes, but now he's working on hand mobility. So I analyzed the recipes and picked some herbs that I could go and plant in his garden in Bali. And I used the Polyglot medicine system to identify the Malay name, which is very close to Indonesia, right? And then, and I also looked across the biodiversity maps to confirm that they grow in the region. And then when I went down to my dad's in May, I then got into a social network of sort of people interested in plant medicine, completely informal network on Bali. And I said, hey, can anybody find me this species? And I sent them pictures and the Bahasa name, Bahasa Malaya, and there's links from the Polyglot site. And they said, yes, you can find them at this shop. Go check it out. And so so I could, using Google Earth, right, Google Maps, I could chart my route from the airport to the laser pointer, okay, from the airport to the garden and then over to my dad. So I could literally just pick it up on my way through. And so here we are with the plants in her shop, on the way to give these plants to my dad. And once I got there, I could also use AI visual confirmation. This app called Picture This uses AI plant recognition. It outputs the botanical species. I can then confirm that that's the botanical species that I'm looking for. Okay, so this is where I think the future of this can lead. I think it opens up all kinds of complex dimensions at this point, right? There's safety and efficacy. There's how do you, if you're opening this up to the public with a big name like NTU as the authority, will people use it, riskily? Also, people misidentification. I'm still not entirely sure that the AI recognition was correct, because I'm now, in fact, this morning I was looking at the size of this plant leaf and her thumbs, maybe it's his thumbs, and then comparing to the size of the plants we got here, they're much bigger, right? So, it's okay because this lady said, yes, you can eat this, it's fine. So if my dad's just having a salad, that's fine too. So he's getting a little plant protein into his diet. So I think there's a lot more, we need a lot more kind of, people to come in to make this a thriving system that can help people interconnect between these dynamic worlds of new drug research, new plant production, traditional medicine, right, and on the ground self-healing. I mean, if you look at the global pharmacology industry, 40% of all modern drugs are based on plants, which means they're growing in our backyards. So if you have communities that can't afford their Medicare, right, can't afford their drugs, this could be an alternate solution, is to introduce gardening for healthy aging, right? And literally help people improve their health through gardening healthy stuff. So that's where I think we can go, but there's now all this multiple ontologies, different human communities and practice communities to engage with. So that's the talk. Oh wait,
Thank
yeah.
you very much, Michael, for this very fascinating overview of your research. I can see that this is just the tip of the iceberg. And in your talk, you have suggested various directions that that you can take, and the rest of us also can take. I will also comment that I've been discussing with Michael what else can be done with the Polyglot Asian Medicine database or knowledge graph. And we have been discussing how to, apply analytics and machine learning to it to try to derive more insights. But at the same time, I'm also fascinated with Michael as a researcher, as a herbal and medicine researcher, and his thought process, his research process. Yeah, I was thinking that it'd be nice to also capture that in the system, because his research and his thinking has evolved over the years, and new researchers cannot think like that. So how do we capture that and I don't know and present that in the system, So I've been thinking of various ways, various kinds of not just AI kind of knowledge, but also human knowledge. How do you capture it and trap it, present it in the digital, platforms to spark other researchers or teach them how to show them how to think, in different ways, for this kind of research. Okay, so I'd like to open the session now to the floor, to the digital floor. So you're welcome to unmute yourself and just ask your question. Or if somebody else is asking a question, then you can enter it in the. I noticed there is a Q&A chat box, and you can enter your questions there as well. Okay, maybe just to kickstart, to give everyone some time to gather their thoughts. I will ask Michael a question. Something that struck me and that relates to what I'm doing now is the relation between herbs and medicine and religion. The relationship between religious, I don't know, transcendental thinking and and medicinal, practical kind of uses. I'm thinking about this because I've just finished a book project with the Nanyang Academy of Fine Arts. So it's a book project on arts and how to train consummate artists, in various fields. And for that also, it's not just like very logical kind of thinking. It's also they are seeking after transcendence and I mean, transcendent and religious concepts come into play. So I was thinking that there's a very interesting link between, training an artist and training a doctor in TCM. And and the concepts, how it relates, or dialectic relation with Taoist concepts.
Yeah. I would say I want to respond multilectic, and this is what I love about the knowledge graph. There's multiple things. I think my early work really looking comparing Taoism and medicine as two kind of domains, comparable domains, came out of this frustration that I had when because I used to practice Chinese medicine, or I have a clinical degree, and then I went into this religious studies and literature, EAL, languages and cultures program, where everyone was reading all these Taoist texts as a form of poetry, as something comparable to narrative structures. And I was like, no, but they're doing things. They're living these practices. This is not, keeping in the semantic realm was very frustrating for me. And then I began to see that really all the analytics were contoured around religious studies questions, and that medical historians had been looking at what had been identified as medical texts. But Taoists were really engaged. So I wanted to kind of break out of the constraints of those two analytical models and find a way to think about it. And I have to say I didn't quite get it in my dissertation because I was just showing that the two models were incomplete, but then I discovered science and technology studies after during my postdoc. I was like, oh, this really works for me. And I began to really think about this term situating knowledge, so developed by Donna Haraway, and I think I personally feel that that's actually the height of historical, really the best historical writing and anthropological writing situates a moment in its rich complexity in its lived world, and so that's actually the title of my other edited volume called Situating Medicine and Religion Across Asia or in Asia, which I brought scholars from working in different time periods across Asia, from the medieval to the modern, to talk about how those two categories of religion, medicine, scholarly categories were not well served, did not do good service to the source, whatever sources they're using, whether it's ethnographic interview or primary text. And in the introduction, I kind of profile that actually these three terms, religion and medicine in Asia, occupy a pretty important set of concepts and associations that we have. We have the kind of orientalized versions of Asian religions. We have Asian medicine really much on the rise, and a lot of traditional Asian religious practices, right? Yoga was developed for enlightenment, and meditation practices are now circulating within health under the guise of health, right? Then if you go to Wikipedia and you look up Chinese medicine, you'll find it's under alternative medicine, which sits in the Wikipedia categories alongside conspiracy theory, right? And quack stuff. So there's this whole broken set of relations that are being fought out as people are negotiating these the contemporary world of kind of the dynamics of power or epistemological power relations are being negotiated through these terms and organizing. So I think religion and medicine in the contemporary occupies quite a different way, a different situation than they did in the Six Dynasties, early imperial period, where so I'm kind of in the book I'm writing right now actually looks at the early imperial period, and I think they become organized by people in different ways because of the power dynamics of the knowing styles that are at work in those historical moments. Yeah.
I was just, as you were speaking, I was just thinking that even Western medicine is kind of going that direction, especially with aging population, and now that I'm in the, retiree strata, I'm more aware, and my friends are, aware of, when we talk to a doctor, it's also like your lifestyle, what are you, other things, it's not like just treating your acute symptoms anymore. It's like, you have so many things going wrong now, and there are so many things that impacted, and the relation, this dynamic balance, becomes important. So I think it's keeping, this idea is getting into Western medicine as well. Okay, I would like to have at least one question from the floor.
I think Pooja has a question.
Oh yeah, Pooja.
Hi,
Yeah,
Michael.
okay, I saw your hand is on. Okay, go ahead, Pooja.
Hi.
Introduce yourself briefly and where you're from, and then ask your
Yeah, I will. Thank you. Thank you, Michael, for your fascinating talk. I'm Pooja. I'm from India, originally from Kerala, and I currently work in Bangalore. And my research is on the history of medicine and the integration between Ayurveda and biomedicine. Right. So I've been sort of looking at oral histories of doctors, patients, and the Ayurvedic practitioners from Kerala, particularly, to see how sort of this multi-epistemic nexus of integrated practices exists. But if you look at the theoretical literature, you will find them to be two separate systems and two, sort of separated from each other as an extension of many other things. So first of all, I wanted to say that the picture that you showed of Asian pennywort is Asian pennywort, so don't worry about that. I think
Oh,
AI
good.
has shown me. Yeah, I have it in my garden, and I've grown up seeing it. So I think it is that. But my question really is like about in the sort of system of things that you've shown, how do you then further bring out the nuances that people may have? Like, for instance, it is not about just about clove having this kind of particular botanical or ethnobotanical link, but it also further has a very nuanced specificities when people use clove, right? So you would also want to somehow capture that knowledge, and so my question really is, you've shown 2 videos. I was like really fascinated by those, but also how do you really then also allow for people's knowledges to come through this?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you. Because as a historian, I love the diversity, right? And as a kind of vicarious anthropologist, I really appreciate a lot of the medical anthropology that people are doing in contemporary Asian medicine. My best critiques actually was just talking to presenting this, and my advisor from London, and Judith Farquhar, is an anthropologist of minority medicines in China, was a recent book of hers. We're like, you've got this, you're systematizing everything, and what about all the richness and complexity of the lived life of these? And I want to say that I never imagined that these digital systems or these digital boxes are in any way a complete representation. In fact, what I'd like them to be is fingers pointing out towards the lived world, right? Towards communities of practice with all of their social and practical variation. And I would love to work with anthropologists, and if people want to do some kind of documentation of that kind of thing, fantastic. In fact, I'm hoping to visit South Asia and Kerala sometime this year, I hope. I'm sort of distantly familiar just through the work of Guy Atwell. I don't know if you know his work, and kind of the ways in which the Gurukul system is jostling against Ayush-based training and this kind of thing. So I think those kind of dynamics are really critically important. One way I think that you can map across variations is what we do is mapping across texts. So if you had, for example, and one thing I'm hoping to do possibly with Guy, maybe you'd be interested, is put together a similar collection of South Asian texts, right? And then we type up, we tag, we use AI to auto-recognize these texts, and then compare, you can compare the training that's given by Ayush, you can do different Gurukul systems, and look at their regional variation. I think there could be a lot of interesting things you can do. However, I want to be the first to say that the digital is a two-dimensional analysis, and it will never, and I hope never does, replace the lived experience and lived practice. And if anything, what I hope to do is it just guides us towards the richness of those lived and embodied traditions and helps us appreciate them more. But I never want to imagine that the digital can represent it as, or substitute it.
Thank you, Michael. I think putting on my technology hat, I'm grappling with the issue as well, and how to not just, of course, we cannot capture the real richness of a lived experience, but perhaps we can capture, I don't know, a shadow and aura of it in the, digital platform, and point to, people like you and Pooja who has the lived experience, so that it can be maybe, maybe some commentary, a metacognition or whatever it is can be applied to that. Okay, one last question we have from Tomo Kumojima. I'm sorry for mispronouncing your name. And the message is, thank you very much for a wonderful presentation. I'm wondering how you decide how to represent missing pieces in your, in your knowledge base, such as plants that have untranslatable words that are no longer used, or lost plants that somehow, are referred to, but nobody is quite sure what it is.
Well, the great thing about, and what I really appreciate again about Chris's introducing me to Neo4j is that you don't have to represent it, because you don't, with a data table that you need, like in a database with access, you have to fill the field, and you have NA, right? So it just says non-applicable, non-applicable, and you get all these NAs everywhere. But with Neo4j, you just don't have any data, and that's fine. The Neo4j can do that. And so, the species just won't show on that page. Is that right, Chris? If there's no content.
Yeah. But yeah, I would say that we can also put a placeholder to say that there's this, what is known about this species, but there is an empty hole to be filled.
Right.
Be filled in the future, maybe a research gap,
Yeah,
So that's
yeah.
the other thing I'm thinking about, how to represent research gap in a knowledge base.
Yeah, one of I'm still having a thought actually from the previous question too about relationality. I hope that will trigger me to come back to that. And the other thought was about, is one of the things I still also have no idea is, of course, people, the terms were associated with different species over time. And some scholars like Chinming and others have gone in and looked at descriptions of the plants at different time periods and then identified, it wasn't that plant, but this species. And we don't have a way to represent that right now. That's another layer of complexity, which still room for the next generations, right, to come and come and work on. In terms of relationality, this just occurred to me while we were talking, is I think one of the powerful things about STS approaches to knowledge and the ontology is it's about relationships. It's about relationalities between actors and between objects and all these things. So conceptually, STS is very interested in that relationality, and Neo4j is all about relationships. Knowledge graphing that's what it does, is charts relationships. So I think when you're talking about, how do you, this is, I think, one of the powers of what it is that you're doing, Chris.
Thank you very much, Michael. And I just want to add that we will be exploring generative AI next. And maybe in a year's time, we can show you that I believe that generative AI can also capture some of these things and can do, other things. In fact, I'm looking at the relation between knowledge graphs and, relation with generative AI, how they can complement each other. In fact, there's quite a lot of research going on right now. Okay, with that, I want to thank Michael for a really fascinating lunch time, at least it's lunchtime here in Singapore, talk, and I'll pass the session over to Professor Setsuko.
Wonderful. Thank you once again, Michael, for sharing your project and how it's evolved over time. I'm really impressed by, how each iteration is attended with so much care, that the data is carefully curated and it kind of builds off of each other. And it's really exciting to see that organic growth of the digital project like this. So thank you so much for sharing your work. And thank you, Chris, for moderating our conversations and sharing your knowledge and expertise about knowledge graph and how it differs fundamentally from the database approach. Lastly, but not least, thank you everybody for coming and for your comments. If you'd like to continue our discussions about polyglot medicine in Asia, please do so in our Discord channel. You can join us using this link, and we are all friendly bunch, so I welcome you over there. Our next webinar is on August 1st, Thursday, 3 p.m. Tokyo time, and it will be hosted by the DH Japan team. And you can register from this link in the chat. And I hope to see many of you again in this in this relational space that we call Zoom room. So thank you so much all for coming, and thank you all for sharing and your intellectual generosity.
Thank you so much, Setsuko. Thanks everyone for coming. And please drop me an email too if you have any questions or want to strike up more research collabs.
Amazing. All right.